Hello and welcome to the Learning Luminaries podcast, the show where every episode I meet with an inspiring innovator to talk about how we're making the world a brighter place by embracing our own inner light. And this week I have a very, very special guest. The first time that I met Rain, we were setting up for a festival that we were both reading at in Arizona, and it was shortly before her 70th birthday. And she hopped up on this ladder and did a job that honestly I was not comfortable doing. I was like, you want me to do what? You want me to just climb around up there? Okay. But she just did it with such confidence and this innate power and capability, and it dazzled me. And that was the first time that I was just really like, whoa, who is this person? And then throughout the course of the show, we continued to read more and more together. And I just was humbled and honored to get to read beside somebody who had mastered their craft. Rain is a prolific author. She is a creator of her own divination system that is very comprehensive to the story of the soul in a way that is very digestible. She reads in many different modalities, and I remember sitting across from her in the shop. And there were only a couple of times where I didn't have somebody sitting in front of me as well, so I could really observe the way that she carried herself in this space of healing. And I was just amazed at the light that she gave off, and that the light that the people in her chair walked away with. She has this incredible acute capacity for giving wise, practical, grounded, loving advice that truly acknowledges and sees the perfect stranger sitting before her. So when I was thinking about who is a really aligned guest that I can come on to have on my show, who will be able to impart some kind of glowing wisdom, I was like, oh, it has to be Rain. It has to be Rain. I have to show everyone this incredible work that she's created. And also I'm really looking forward to the continued opportunity to study from somebody who I really consider to be a master of this craft. So welcome to the show, Rain. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Wisteria. What an amazing mirror. I have never seen myself from that viewpoint. Thank you.
Yo, you're welcome. It was really incredible. I don't remember what you said in this one specific reading that I'm thinking about, but it was a longer one. We were having a really slow day, and it was still in the morning time, and you probably sat with this guy for 20 minutes. And he was one of those guys who's very skeptical. He definitely doesn't believe in what we're doing. And by the time that he left, you had spoken to him about everything that he needed to be seen and understood with, that nobody had the capacity to talk to him about. And you did it with such compassion and honesty that the words just flowed from you in a way that amazed me, because sometimes I have a hard time looking at people and knowing how to let the words flow. And so I was able to see the way that you were tapped into that wisdom and tapped into that source when you deliver work. And so I'm just really curious, to hear more about your journey and how you've developed these skills. So where did your journey as a spiritual seeker start?
As being a very, very weird kid who never fit anywhere. I would have to say, let me bring in something that I've been studying diligently for the past 5 years or so and got into intensely the last 3 or 4 weeks, called human design. Now then, in human design, they divide people up into different types with different abilities and different gifts. And I happen to be a projector, which means that the great superpower and the absolute failing that I've got is that I'm a permeable membrane. When somebody sits down with me, they're part of me, and I'm a part of them as long as they're sitting there. And it took me a very long time to recognize that. Started when I was in school. My friends would come and talk to me, and they would be deeply troubled. And after talking for a while, they would walk away and they would feel all kinds of better, and I'd have the problem. And I had to recognize, oh, this isn't mine. What do I learn to do with it? And it was many, 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 many years of work before I finally understood, oh, this is just the way I'm built. Now then, if I were going to take this and apply it for other people, I would say there is no such thing as a gift or a superpower that does not have two sides.
Mm.
I tell this story lots and it's pungent. Sorry. It's like a coin. On one side of the coin, you have a beautiful face of the lion. He's brave, he's courageous, he is dominating in the most magnificent way. And on the other side of the coin, you have his little kitty asshole, and everybody knows what happens in a cat box. It's awful. If you learn to control your gift instead of it controlling you, it's a great tool. And if it controls you, you're wrecked.
Mm.
I have spent lots of time diving in and out of the waves of wrecked and in control.
Absolutely. Wow, I am a projector too in my human design. So that's another really cool reflection between us. And one of the things that you taught me that's been really helpful, it was a day that I was having a really hard time grounding, and you told me to find my bones because my bones are where the earth is held inside of me. And I would just love to hear more about this like grounding practice.
Well, it's not actually grounding because for me, as using human design language, I'm a 1-3 mental projector. It means that darn near everything in my whole projector chart is empty and open. And I will go back in addition to that and talk about a very fine teacher that I had long ago who is gone now, who would look at me and scowl and say, "Why the hell do you want to tie your ass to the biggest rock you can find? If you ground yourself, you're part of the planet. Aren't you trying to raise into spirit?" And so I learned trying to find some way that I could settle myself, to center myself, and literally your body is a part of the planet. It's made of the stuff the planet's made of. When we die, our spirit separates from the physical, and the physical returns to being the stuff of the planet. Whether the bugs eat us, or the lions or the coyotes eat us, or it just molders in a box somewhere, it's stuff that the planet is made of. So your flesh is enough to ground and center. And centering is the practice that I prefer rather than simply grounding. If you are centered, particularly as a projector, you know where you begin and end and where the other begins and ends. And you're never lost in them, which was
Mm.
my big problem. I easily got lost in somebody else, especially love partnerships. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's easy to, especially as a highly sensitive, energetic person, to deeply entangle yourself with another. And so learning and prioritizing having that sense of self is kind of the basis of what I've learned to be the basis of building a healthy relationship is like you can't lose that you-ness in the
Mhm.
space of us.
I like the ancient Irish Celtic pattern of relationship. It was explained to me that within relationship, you have one full person, him, and one full person, her, and between the two of you, you create us. And that us is both part of you and separate from both of you, so
Mm.
that both of you contribute to it and build it and nurture it, but it does not consume you. That's a really nice image I feel very comfortable with.
Yeah, I love that. I resonate with that really deeply. This idea of centering brings up another thing that is part of your work that I'm still diving into, that I'm still like reading through and understanding. But I want to talk about the night, like the knighthood of the inner heart and what that means. Where is the inner heart? How do I get there? What does it mean to be a knight of it? Who is a knight of it? Like, so many questions.
Well, let's start from scratch. To be a knight is something that I made up, whole cloth and from scratch. But I did not make up the inner heart, nor did I make up the process of achieving the unity with it in let's see, in the Golden Dawn, it's called Knowledge and Conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. In Hermeticism, it's also your inner heart. In Sufi, it's referred to in similar terms. And what I was doing when I wrote that was I was transcribing my experiences and my quest and saying, you know, if I were going to make this something that people could do as a way of looking into themselves and having a pattern to follow, to look, I'm looking at your little girl's waving tail behind you. She's just cute.
She's like determined to be in the episode.
So there is a very specific process that you can find on the celestial map, following the process of the spiritual lessons, which are created from the tree of life, the Kabbalah. And if you follow each of those pathways from the Sephiroth, which are stations of being, through the pathways, which are the major arcana in tarot, there are experiences that you have in your internal world. Now, then, the internal world is a whole universe more vast than anything you experience in mundane reality that exists inside of you all of the time. But just like if you had been raised, for instance, in a little village in New Mexico, you wouldn't know what's happening in Cincinnati, much less Hong Kong. So the celestial map, and specifically the part of it that represents the tree of life, represents your internal world and places where you will find specific experiences, descriptions of how you use your mind and your inner will to equalize your own experience so that you can move from one position to the other on the tree. And your inner heart is the center of the tree of life. It is Tiferet, right in the middle. It's the equalizing point from creation, which is far beyond our conception, and all the way down to Malkuth, which is, hey, this is the everyday mundane world that we live in. Knock on the table, stub your toe on the coffee table, find something to eat, play with your dog. All of these things exist in your outside world in Malkuth. And from that point, you step up into the purple Sephiroth on the map, and you follow the pathway of the 30-second path, which means you step inside yourself, you move through your internal being, noticing everything that you're afraid of and every place that makes you nervous and everything that you have to overcome to reach a place of clarity in your own imagination, and bingo, you're in Yesod.
Interesting. I think that that's a really great way to introduce the map. I want to show an image of it. I'll probably edit a picture of the map on so that people can see it without the glare. But this is the map that we're talking about, which is a map that Rain designed. In this, so all of these points here are the Sephiroth, which I'm going to ask you more questions about that. I'm going to ask you more questions about everything you just said.
Yes. Now then, what you just pointed to are the pathways between the Sephiroth. The little round colored bubbles are Sephiroth. There you go. Those. Now then, those are stations on the tree of life. The pathways between them are on the tree of life glyph, and they are also the major arcana
of
in
the
the
tarot. Which,
Yep.
like, for people who don't know, the major arcana means major secret or large secret, right? So it's like the big discoveries of the world, and the tarot deck is made out of the big secrets and the like small secrets or the mundane moments of life.
Yes.
So if you're pulling a lot of major arcana cards in your reading, that's how you can know, oh, this is something like really big. This is big, momentous discoveries. The other part of the map, just as we're explaining kind of the overall, is this here wheel in the center that's color coded fabulously.
Now then, that
and
is in
this
the
is
different colors of the elements. You will notice the green for earth, the yellow for air, the orange and red are fire, and the blues are water. You have all of the elements in the pattern of the astrological wheel,
Yeah.
because the astrological wheel in each of these pie slices describes specific parts of your life.
Mm.
So when you are dropping one of the glass markers onto the tree, onto the celestial map, the glass markers describe the fact that this is your personal experience of this part of your life. And when you drop it, it goes and finds its place on the map to say, hey, this is what I'm feeling right now. And that's
Mm.
how it works.
So the way that you read with the map is you have it set out before you, and you have, I believe it's 10 stones.
Yes.
10 stones, and each one of them has a question associated with them, and they're each associated with a certain Sephiroth, a state of being.
Yes.
And the questions are the same questions that you ask everyone every time. Because it gives you this full scope, this full picture, and you start it from Kether, which is this top point and like the ether, and then it goes in and down and through all the way back down into like the material world of spirit, which
Mm-hmm.
in a reading it's like, okay, here's the big theme, and we're going to get down to like, what do you need to do about it next. The map is very detailed, very specific, and very accurate. And the way that you cast on it is you hold glass stones that represent each one of the colors of the Sephiroth. You drop it on top of the map, and wherever it lands, that's where like your spirit is how your spirit's communicating. Now, also walk me through the field behind the map.
The field behind the map represents the fractal that is the basis of all reality. When you go back into chaos mathematics and you see the Mandelbrot formula, that's the name of the
What?
formula that generates fractals.
Okay.
You recognize those shapes in the pattern of the seeds and the way they grow on the sunflower, and broccolini and the way it grows, and the stars and the spirals of the galaxies. Every single thing that we look at is built in similar shapes, river basins, and the way that tree leaves branch out, and the patterns in the iris, and the branching of our blood vessels. All of creation is built on a similar fundamental set of patterns. And
Yeah.
fractals are the best description mathematically and visually that I've ever seen. And so that pattern behind it means this is what is behind all creation, coming into manifestation and moving out of manifestation. If you don't understand it, you can't see it, you can't give it a form. Well, there it is. It's in the fractal. And then the outside ages that are completely dark,
Mhm.
somewhere in our lives, we've got to admit we just flat don't know everything. And that's what that is.
Yeah. I
How do
remember
you face the complete unknown?
when you first started reading for me with this map, I think I dropped like half of the first reading in the black spaces, and I was so frustrated. I was like, and it was
That's
true. There was a
okay.
lot of unknown in my life at that time. It was very accurate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, so it's a journey. So what you're saying, okay, I want to connect it. There's a lot of information, right? This is a very complex esoteric system that you've devised out of a series of other systems that in order to truly comprehend what we're talking about, people have to kind of understand like some of the bits and pieces to build up to this map. And that's really what I want to talk about today. I want to know more about the Sephiroth and what you mean when you say that they're states of being. And I want to know more about the journey of the world tree and how we as humans and as people interact with that journey.
Okay, we're going to start from the fundamental concept, as above, so below.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to go back and read about the Tree of Life, go find Dion Fortune's book, The Sacred Kabbalah. Good fundamental book that describes the large as above, because that's where actually everything starts. Up in Kether, the white one at the clear one at the very top. There you go. That one.
Yeah.
That is before there is light and dark, before there is anything except a gathering of energy. It's not an entity. It is not a God. It is not anything but being. And from that being, you go whoosh out to the white ones right next to it. And that represents the absolute first movement. If Kether was a point, Shokma is a line.
Mm.
And then when that line spreads out in a plane and begins to gather, that's Bina. So you have every culture describes the process from beingness into the division of light and dark, hot and cold, male and female, up and down. This is polarity in its most fundamental form. Now then, that's coming from the top down, as above. Then it moves down into the blue one, zip, over on this side, right under, there you go. That is unconditional love and expansion. It opens out and looks around and goes, wow. And directly across to balance it, you might as well hold on to it, love. There you go. That one is discipline. Without discipline and love together, everything is out of form and out of shape. And from there, right down into the center of the pie slices, there you go. That is also a part of the structure of spiritual life dropped into the center of your physical experience. Why in the world did I do that when there are separate things? They're not really. They're not separate at all.
The spiritual and the physical?
The spiritual and the physical are part and parcel of the same thing.
Yeah.
You are a spiritual being having a physical experience, and that physical experience is why you came here as a spirit to participate in all of this craziness.
Yes.
And so that is your inner heart. That is the position where your inner self is guided by spirit from outside of the mundane structure. And that is the point of becoming, back to the beginning, a knight of the inner heart. You're looking for your pole star. You're looking for your compass. You're looking for what guides you. Because
Why aren't we born connected to that?
we are. And then we get distracted.
Mm.
We're absolutely born with that being part and parcel of us. And our job coming here is all about learning how to navigate within the chaos of everyday life and mundane experiences. And I don't know about you, but the last time I banged my head on the side of a cabinet, it was a lot more vivid to me than my inner spirituality. I was definitely distracted.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's exactly what has happened. And that's part of why that inner heart is in the center of all of our mundane experiences.
Mm.
So
Because
all
it, I just want to, because I've been saying a lot in my readings, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And so if all of this is the what you do, it sounds like to me, this is the how you would do it.
yeah, yeah, that's
Okay.
the way you do it. Yes.
So then from this center point of your heart, it goes back into the physical.
Not quite. Not
Okay.
quite. There is the physical all around it on the board for your mundane experiences. But from the center point of your heart, then it goes over there to the green, which is nature without people having conditioned it. This is bunny rabbits being born and coyotes eating them. This is storms rolling across the planet. This is the climate is in the midst of transmutation and change. This is ice ages past. This is volcanoes past and volcanoes present. And all of the progression of Gaia as an entity and our physicality being mixed in with that. It's not separate from us. It is full of instinct and emotion. If I were going to make an archetypal character out of popular movies, I would say Deanna Troy lives very much in that space. It's how you feel, it's the empathy, it's the connection, it's the place you and I as projectors fall into with the entire environment around us. It's a part of us, we're a part of it. There's no separation, and basically we're skinless in the middle of this chaotic environment, trying to figure out how to navigate our way through it. So the next step you go to in order to balance that skinlessness is straight across the line to the orange one. There you go. The orange one is all about clarity and logic. Mr. Spock lives there.
Mm-hmm.
The professor on Gilligan's Island lives there. It's the man of science. It's all of the information. It's also the Akashic records there, by the way. Now then, if you look at the pathway between them, we're going to play pathways for the first time. You'll see there are larger pathways, and every pathway that comes in from any one of the Sephiroth pointing toward Tiferet in the center goes all the way to Tiferet. But this one is the first one that shows us its path right across here where we can say, the tower is the destruction of all expectation. You have a nice form built up and you think you know what's going on, but if you connect nature and emotion and empathy to logic and records and science, you're going to have to change something because they don't fit in the same pocket. The
Right.
tower destroys all of your preconceptions and makes you look at it as it is right now. And probably you're going to have to make a few changes.
Interesting. That also makes sense with this idea of the tower being the falling away of false foundations, right?
Yeah.
Like misinterpretations, things like that. Like the
Yep.
tower is going to be the thing that disintegrates that, which is really interesting when we're looking at the changes that are happening on like a global scale. There's so much that's being revealed about like miscalculations, or like we like science knew this one thing and now it's learning more and it's learning in tandem with nature and with the forces of the world. And so our ideas of science is changing and our idea of nature is changing, and all of those sort of things playing into one another is a huge part of this collective tower moment that we're having, that's
Yep.
playing out really globally, honestly.
Yes. Everybody's living through it, whether they want to or not. Damn it.
True. Yeah. So then after you have, also you said that each one of the Sephiroth is connected to a planet.
Yep. We'll get there in a minute. We're not quite all the way to the bottom yet.
Okay.
Because then from the orange one and from the green one, we go down into the purple one, which represents your imagination. Now then, the multicolored one at the very bottom is Malkuth. And from your imagination, from your ordinary life, you step into your internal world, into your imagination, and then the entire tree of life is what you fill in because it was created to be an encyclopedia to fill in information and understanding in each of these categories of your existence.
Explain that to me again.
Okay. The old statement in the Kabbalah is every person has to build their own tree of life.
Yeah.
My encyclopedia does not have all of the same things in it that yours does. You're a generation and a half behind me, babe. And
Mm-hmm.
I am way in a different place, was born in a different world, and lived in a different world. My pieces of the encyclopedia have been filled in on each of those Sephiroth, which represent parts of your personality
Mm-hmm.
and drives that everyone has. Now then, when you asked about every planets, we are going to talk about the fact that astrology is basically three fundamental symbolic languages. We have that pie cut into slices in the center. Yep. And each one of those represents a different part of your life. You have 9 planets. We're going to count the moon and the sun as planets or drives that everyone has. So everybody has Sun, which is ideation, Mercury, which is communication, Venus, which is affection and affiliation. Who do you connect to and how and why? The moon, which is the ebb and flow of your own emotions. And we're going to move out from there to Mars. How do you get aggressive when you need to move? How do you have courage? How do you have will? How do you stick to something when you commit? And then we're going to move to Jupiter. How do you expand? Uranus. How does chaos look in your life?
Mm-hmm.
Saturn, what are your hard lessons? Now, if you hold the board up, we will count up the planets from the very bottom. The Earth is Malkuth. The purple one is the moon.
Right in the middle.
There you go. Over there is Mercury, the orange one. Venus is the green one.
Sorry about the glare, everyone.
It'll get edited. We're all good. The center golden one, Tiferet, is the sun. It's the center of our solar system. It's also our center in our solar plexus. Make some sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Okay, then we're going to rise to the red one. That's Mars. The blue one over there is Jupiter, expansion and unconditional love. The black one is Saturn. Then we're going to skip a little bit out of it and say chaos or Uranus is the white one there. And beingness is everything that is without a planetary attribution. We're going to call it the universe. So basically, you're using the same language as we're using in astrology to describe people's needs and drives on the board as we are in astrology. And the same reading will apply when you drop the markers. The colors correspond. The brown one is Malkuth and the earth. The question's, what do I do now? The purple one is, what do I want? Your imagination always wants something. That's the fuel that's driving you. The orange one, what do I need to learn? The green one, where's my passion? Where's the juice in life and where am I connected? Tiferet, the golden one. How do I find my center? We were talking about the center, your solar plexus, your gut. For most people, there is the center, even in human design, where you go, oh, here's how I know who I am, where I am. For us projectors, it's a little bit different. And in human design, there are different pieces, but in people's bodies, they find the place to understand, oh, this is my center. Then we're going to jump to the red one. There's Mars. How do I use my courage? And what is it that I need to apply it to? The blue one, Jupiter. How do I move forward in love and trust? Or unconditional love? Each of these questions you can state just a little bit different, but it's the same fundamental question. Okay, up on the black one, there's Saturn. It's what do I need? What am I afraid of and what am I responsible for? Those two questions are deeply intertwined with one another.
Yeah, they are.
And then the tricky one, the white one over here, Uranus, this is all about what is the wild card in your life you have no control over. And depending on how you face it, it can be your freedom or your doom. And the top one, where's spirit calling you? Top one, where's spirit calling you?
Yeah, that's how the reading starts. Which
Where's
is such an
spirit calling
intro.
you?
She goes, where's spirit calling you next? And then kicks it off
Because
so well.
There's your North Star.
Yeah.
There is the place where it's not a place. It's not a place. Do you remember the old fairy tale phrase, from a land beyond, beyond, from a land past hope and fear? I bid you, genie, now appear. Okay. Hope and fear and emotion are all things we feel in the mundane world.
Okay.
You skip into your internal universe, and then you begin to move past it. By the time you get up to Tiferet, the hopes and the fears have faded away with Hod and Netzach, the logic and the worry in the purple one, and the nature and your passion and your own nature in the green one. In Tiferet, it's all balanced. It all comes together. And you have a place of peace where you are connected with spirit directly. You are connected with the body that you're wearing directly. And you have spiritual guidance from your own core. Because contrary to popular belief, not everybody is the same kind of critter. And not everybody needs to be guided the same direction, nor are right and wrong and good and bad the same for everybody. Coyotes cannot eat grass, they eat rabbits. Rabbits
Mhm.
don't appreciate that. Rabbits eat grass, and they think it's evil for coyotes to eat them. And it's the same thing with everything, as above, so below.
Right. And then you said this to me and it really expanded my worldview when you said to the rabbit the coyote is evil, but to the coyote's child the coyote is good. And then
Yep.
to the coyote the farmer is evil, but to the world like the coyote is the so it's like
In the
this.
farmer's world, the coyote is evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it comes right down to that which will destroy you is evil to you. That which nurtures you and helps you grow is good to you.
Mm. And so everyone's relationship to good and evil is entirely subjective.
It's entirely individual, but not subjective, because
Okay.
being dead is not exactly a subjective experience. It's real.
Right. Interesting. I understand what you're saying. Something that I'm wondering, so in my own journey, I've been really coming to terms with the fact that there are no bad feelings. There are just feelings that we don't want to feel because they suck. But like grief and anger and fear and all of those things are necessary, powerful teachers, just as joy and happiness and freedom and excitement are. That they're
Yep.
like the opposite of the polarity and the frequency, and therefore they're absolutely necessary. And so our relationship to the way that we process grief and fear and shame and all those things kind of has to expand around this, like, oh, being sad is bad, right? Because like there are some things that you should be sad about, and there are some things that you shouldn't necessarily like that you shouldn't harbor that sadness, right? Like you there are things that you should be sad about, but that doesn't mean that like in order to honor your sadness, you have to live as an embodiment of sadness. But you still have to know how to honor that feeling and experience it without repressing it or shaming it or feeling bad about it. And so what I'm wondering is when you talk about living balanced and living in like alignment and living from this place of the heart, there has to be some awareness and acknowledgement that like nirvana and euphoria and that place of oh, I've attained the inner heart doesn't disconnect you from the reality of reality. It is more
Precisely.
about the way that you experience the fluctuations of reality. Like being enlightened doesn't mean that you're not going to be sad. It means that you're going to understand sadness as part of the process.
Oh, being enlightened means that you have to go home and do the laundry. You can come back and sit on the mountain again tomorrow. It's a temporary glimpse of what is beautiful. And yet, because we came to this planet, we're wearing bodies, we're wearing this skin suit, we participate in every experience that can possibly happen to a skin suit because we are no more or less real or important than rabbits and mosquitoes
Mm-hmm.
and giraffes and elephants and whales.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things experience the ebb and flow of being born, living best you're able, getting caught by another predator and eaten, or catching your own breakfast or lunch or dinner.
Mm-hmm.
All of these experiences are real and you have feelings with them. Your feelings are generating energy. What are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
Now then, my little system there is not the only system that talks about this. Buddhism talks about it. Christianity talks about it. Taoism talks about it. Every single um, Wicca talks about it. The
Mm-hmm.
Vikings talk about it. Every single system that connects human beings to spirituality describes the process of dealing with the intensity of emotion and the vividness of physical experience that causes that emotion. What do you do with it, and how do you deal with it?
Mm. Where, and it's okay if you don't want to touch this question, but where did we come from? Right? You're saying like we're spirits experiencing a physical body. We chose to come to this earth. I've been I have something before you answer my question, I want to share. I've been recently getting a lot of inquiries from people asking me to help them explore their cosmic origins, asking me to explore the nature of the soul. And in the regressions and the workings and the channelings that I've done, every time that I've gotten back to that point of origin, it's been like what you're talking about with this energy, right? Like people want there to be a deity or a thing or something, but every time that I've experienced it, and I've experienced it a couple of times over the years, it's the base elements interwoven with one another inside of the darkness of the womb. And like that is the beginning of everything from what I've experienced. So I'm wondering what where are we coming from? What are we? Like when people are experiencing having these cosmic souls, right? Like I have this deep yearning and memories of a planet that does not exist. And I know that I'm from there because I've been there and I feel there and I grieve for that place and I look forward to returning back to that home. But when I look into information about this kind of like galactic energy, the information is so distorted that I'm wondering if you can shed some light on this idea of where we've come from and why we're here.
Oh, Mashi, I'm afraid I'm going to stick a mixer in it.
Okay.
Everything above Hod and Netzach is not in time or space. If
Okay.
there is no time and there is no space, there is no place. There is energy.
I understand.
And when it goes all the way up to the top, its experience does nothing but nothingness. All of these ebb and flow of your experiences, what makes you think that you were only here or only there, or that it's a one-time experience to achieve body and existence on this planet? It's not a one-time experience. It can be for some individuals, but obviously for you, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
You come from before that. What was the face that you wore before you were born? Oh, now we're going back to Zen. This is another question that every major philosophy has looked into, and what they find back behind the face of God is that before everything, there was existence and beingness that was not beingness and had no form and no time and no space.
Mm.
Just isness, if you will. And
So
that's a
this
stupid word.
idea of consciousness expanding to experience itself, you think that there's something to that?
I think it's possible. I would have to look at all of those black borders around the thing and say there's an enormous amount that I just don't know.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
find interesting ideas, but in my explorations, I too have found you go just so far and the body is gone and the planet is gone and the feelings are gone. And yet between here and there are ecologies, there are full worlds and planets and existences full of things that we don't even imagine in our limited walking around in the skin suit.
Mm.
There's lots more out there than just us.
So in a lot of different ways, right? Like it's possible, I think it's probable, right, for life to exist on other planets just based off of probability alone. But then also, I have an idea that energies can exist at different dimensions of frequency and reality. And
Yes,
that so like when we're talking about the things that are up here, they're at like the higher frequency.
they're at a different frequency than ours because when you get to the point where you can go, for instance, up to Gebra or up to Chesed, beyond that you can't go, but there is a placeless place with entities that dwell there.
So that would be like this idea of a six-dimensional entity knowing all of the answers to all of the questions but not being able to physically act on anything because they're not in the physical realm, they're in this dimension of knowledge.
They're in the dimension of whatever frequency, because you've got to recognize that planets are representative of frequency. The Sephiroth are representative of frequency. We're talking about turning a radio dial so that it goes from zzz to
Mm-hmm.
and that each frequency has its full array of entity which shares that frequency and is able to exist in the lowest parts of it to the highest parts of it as much as it can handle.
So the point of traveling along the world tree is sort of like the hero's journey, where it's like you're having the necessary experiences to evolve yourself, your consciousness, your life, whatever. And then each Sephiroth, each point that you reach is like a different tuning pitch of experience, but it's
Yep,
not like the goal is not to maintain one of these frequencies, but to
exactly.
experience all of them.
Yes. And to recognize, okay, what you're doing is you're developing the capacity to enter and leave at will. Now then, what is the difference between a shaman and a crazy person?
That's a good question. What's the answer?
The shaman is able to enter the state and leave the state at will, and the poor crazy fellow living on the street can't get out.
Right.
He can't get in and he can't get out.
Yeah. Spiritual
He's stuck where
psychosis.
he
You go
is.
too far.
And so what you're doing, developing your capacity to move as not only a knight of the inner heart, but there are steps beyond that. First, you go to be a knight of the inner heart. You develop your capacity to enter these states of energy, get information, get understanding, move so you can get advice from the entities who live there that is applicable to you and what you're doing, and return and apply that. Because if you'll remember, the culmination of the hero's journey is that you go forth, you have experiences, you conquer, you receive gifts and abilities, and you bring them back and you serve your people, you share them. And so this is just a template for an encyclopedia of experience that you are filling in each of the pieces within each of these frequencies in your own experiences. That's why when I hand you my narrative of, oh, I experienced this, that's not the narrative of what I experience every time I go there, nor will it be the narrative of your experience when you go there. If it becomes codified and this is all you're supposed to find, you've lost the point. This
So then
is
how does somebody attune to a different Sephiroth? How do they like go through the journey? Like going from the names, I'm so bad with names, but going from how do you
use
say
the
the Earth
colors.
one?
Malkuth, the
Malkuth.
brown
How like when it says that Malkuth is connected to the green one?
Netzach.
Netzach.
Okay.
When it
Now
says that
then,
the by the moon, how do
okay.
you yeah,
There's
you
your
understand.
signpost. There's your signpost. What is your experience of the ebb and flow of your emotions, and how does that connect to nature? Each
Ah,
one of the pathways is your signpost to tell you how to get there.
okay.
It's all laid out in signs and signposts. And if you're confused, go back and look at your major arcana, read up on, okay, what is the experience of the moon or the sun or judgment or the star? The experience of that in the major arcana is the clue to how do you shift your consciousness from this state of being to this state of being.
That is really interesting. And
It's a
so
map.
tell me more about the connection between Netzach and Shesed. Am I saying that right?
Chesed,
Yeah. And how it says it's fortune. Like walk me through what that looks like. Because that's a
the
pretty
wheel.
big jump, right?
Actually, it's only a big jump because it's laid out around that fat wheel in the middle, and
Uh-huh.
only because I stuck it there. I mean, the discipline of tarot, the discipline of the tree of life, the discipline of astrology, none of those values have changed just because I put them in together in a polyglot so that I could look at them all together. They've been connected for hundreds of years, as far back as I could read those connections.
Right.
They're all part and parcel of an encyclopedic understanding of existence. So back to your question, what does the Wheel of Fortune mean to you? What happens on the Wheel of Fortune?
change, like monumental, unpredictable, expansive change.
In cycles.
Yeah.
In cycles, repeatable, endless cycles.
So
And
it would
you
be
know,
like, so if Shased is the expansion of love and like how you move forward in love and grace and the expansive of divine love itself, and then Netzach is nature and the forces of nature, the way that we expand is through this cyclical process of growth and decay and growth and decay. Okay, I understand. So then when you're experiencing, like if you were to pull in a reading the Wheel of Fortune, which I did today, by the way, um uh you would be moving from like you would be experiencing the unification of love and nature.
or you would be experiencing something that is happening in cycles, and you could break it down easily and say, this too shall pass.
Interesting. Interesting.
Because each one of those pathways is an experience in itself. If
Yeah.
you want to move from one place to the other, you use that pathway to make your way from here to there. But the path itself is also a transitional experience from one state through a transitional experience to another state.
Okay, that clicked in my brain. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. So I also think it's interesting the way that they lead into each other, right? Like I've recently been thinking about like the tower going into the star and image like imagraphically, I don't know if that's a word, but it should be.
I've got it. It is
Um
now.
I think about it as like you're in this tower, right? And then it's falling, it's crumbling, and now you get thrown from the tower and you're outside and you're on the ground and you just crash landed on the ground and oh my god, it hurts and you're probably crying, but you're also looking up at the world and there's this expansiveness of stars. And it's like, wow, I am so small and so significant and so insignificant all at the same time.
Okay, what Sephiroth are you in when you're feeling that? You're in Netzach,
Yeah.
okay? There is the point where those two meet. That's the experience of that place. You see how
Ah.
that works?
I do see how that works.
Yeah,
So, what if you're like, just some random examples? What if you get like laid off from a job?
okay.
Would you still be like, that's a tower moment? But I
It
almost would
could
see that
be.
as more like the tower from Netzach to Hod, like going from Venus to Mercury,
Or,
because
wait a minute.
yeah.
It could also be the wild card event you have no control over,
Mm,
way up at Shokma going, here you go. This is either your freedom or your disaster. How are you going to ride this?
right, which is connected to the Fool.
And
Interesting. Fascinating.
the Fool is the big, okay, you're going to start at Kether with the Fool. And the Fool is the absolute innocence, lack of expectation, Zen mind walking out into the chaos of the world. There you go in Shokma. That innocent movement into everything. It could be disaster, it could be beauty, it could be, it's all of it. It's
Mhm.
all of it. But you notice on the other side, where the magician comes out, he's going over into Bina, responsibility and control. The
Saturn.
magician is all about the decision to make.
Right.
See how those two things move forward from the nothing that is nothingness and everything into two different sorts of energy.
Mm. And the connection between them being the high priestess.
Yes,
The ability to interpret and feel your way through the unknown.
just like that. Just like
Fast.
that. And you see how those two things balance with the horizontal bar. That adventure is always about a balance between things that would be way out of balance if they were not connected somehow. And if you could find that space along that horizontal experience, you find your own balance inside of yourself.
Interesting. I'm really interested in Tepereth and the idea of the inner heart because I would like to live there. I want to be there
Yes,
all the time.
yes.
Is
And
that
it's not,
possible?
oh, of course it is. It's not about the euphoria of the inner heart. It's about the absolute balance of knowing that all of these things are happening around you all of the time. The good ones, the bad ones, the hard ones, the beautiful ones, everything is moving. This is the still point that you experience.
And like
That's your
you
inner heart.
are the still point.
Your inner heart is the still point.
Yeah. Like you can return back to your still point.
Yep, yep, yep. That is being centered.
Is that the voice of our intuition?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is
Interesting.
the voice of guidance. That is the voice, that is the gyroscope that keeps you in balance. But
I
you
think that
have to awaken all of the rest of the pieces of it to reliably be able to enter and leave at will. And that's what the journey's about.
and how do people do that?
You're working on it. I'm working on it.
We're everyone who's listening working on it. Great job, everyone.
Or not. There are my days.
Absolutely. And that's part of it. What that that disconnection from the inner heart can be so hard to experience because it's so isolating, it's so lonely, it's so defeating to feel so small and so mortal, I think, in some
Mhm.
ways. So what part of the journey is the disconnection?
All of it, sweetheart. All of it. Every bit of it. Just like every bit of it is the connection. You go all the way back up to the beginning and look at the black one and the white one, Bina and Shokma,
Uh-huh.
connection and disconnection, fear and peace, responsibility. The whole gamut is the journey.
So it's like intentionally experiencing the fluctuation between connection and disconnection.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't like that. I
They
accept
are
it, but I don't
both,
like it.
they are both states of righteousness. Sitting in the middle of it sucks. They are both right if you are able to enter and leave at will. When
So,
you, okay, let's go back and make it very mundane.
yeah.
When you have a lover and you realize that that lover is not a place you want to stay always, and you leave, that disconnection is devastating. And yet it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And then when you enter into a relationship where it is someplace you want to stay, or you're entering in a new relationship when you totally don't know, that's a reconnection and a reblossoming. That whole cycle is a part of the whole experience. You enter and leave repeatedly into each of these states, into each of these experiences, into each of these adventures, and it's absolutely what you're supposed to be doing. It goes back to what you said about being happy, being sad are irrelevant. Those are energetic states of temporary nature.
Hmm. I'm wondering if you can illuminate for me more. I understand that the shadow is necessary, right? Like, I understand that, like, light casts shadows on purpose and that there has to be balance and order. But what I don't understand is the violence, is like the nature of, and I get that destruction is like part of creation, but it's hard to like look at a world that actively harms innocence for what seems like senseless purposes and understand the nature of why without feeling defeated by all of these dark energies that we're facing as a collective.
Well, I'm going to be really mean.
Okay.
You're being human centric.
Ooh, okay.
Now, last time you had a mosquito land on you preparatory to feeding itself, did you smack him before he could insert his little beak and get a nice meal that you would never have missed had he taken it?
Honestly, I
You
try not to kill
violent, evil
myself.
creature.
I try to just like shoo them away because of that.
Uh-huh. And the last time you pulled up a carrot and ate it,
Mm,
did you feel compassion for the carrot?
yes.
And yet it's still a necessity for you to eat. Life feeds upon life on this planet.
Yeah.
Violence is part of the consumption of life and energy on this planet. Do people make up damn fool, ugly, stupid reasons for doing ugly, miserable things and cause incredible suffering that is unnecessary? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do bonobo chimpanzees make war on other bonobo chimpanzees? They thought for a long time they didn't, but they do. Do ants make war on each other? Yes, they do. Is it simply a part of the body of turmoil and tumult on this planet? When you start looking at only human ideas and ideals, you lose the perspective of, as above, so below, what is real in places where human beings had nothing to do with setting it up.
Right, like summer and winter.
Like summer and winter, like coyotes and baby rabbits, like orcas eating porpoises and seals.
So then, as human beings who have conscious thought and choice and free will and the ability to heal and understand themselves, like I just can't imagine that we have to stay that way. Right? Like I understand that like life and death and creation and all of those things are like essential, but I don't think that like the perpetuation of suffering has to be so normalized. And
Oh,
that
we're not making it normalized. And we're not saying that people have to continue to perpetuate their own savagery.
right.
That's not what we're saying at all. We're saying that simple violence and life feeding upon life is part of the planet itself, and to condemn it out of hand because we shouldn't be that way is part of our cultural ideal and not a part of the way the planet works. And still, do we want to be the energy which nurtures? Because if you look back at the board, you have a choice where on each of these spiritual stations of existence you choose to be.
Mm.
Are you going to sit there and say, I'm going to kill everything in front of me so that I can eat it all? Or are you going to say, I'm going to have a garden and I'm going to deliberately grow and nurture my garden and I'm going to milk my goats, and the goats that I cannot keep, I'm going to eat, and I will kill them as kindly as possible, but I'm still going to eat them because I'm alive.
Mm.
There are different ways of dealing with different energies, and that's part of what I was talking about people of different nature. We're not all the same kind of critter. And honestly, when we are raised with the privilege, and it is a privilege, of being gentle people, and we did not have to fight just to survive. You did not have to stand in the front door with a shotgun so that the man didn't come through the door and beat you to death and rape you and then kill your kid's sister. There was nobody else to call. There was no telephone. It's in the middle of the mountains. What are you going to do? You're going to stand there with a shotgun and you're going to say, I really think it would be a good idea if you left.
Yeah.
And how about the inner city where the kid walks out the door and the bigger kids jump on him and beat the hell out of him and whatever's in his pocket's gone?
Yeah.
How about that? It's survival. These things are not universal. We have wars going on right now because one group of people felt so bitterly abused that they came and did atrocious and horrible things to another group of people who felt so bitterly abused that they're still doing atrocious and horrible things to the people who were not connected with the individuals who started it. They were connected with an ideology. And
Right.
the
The collective shadow.
individuals from that ideology are still continuing to fight. Is it wrong or is it right? It's brutal. It's horrible. If I could make it stop, I totally would. I cannot say that this is right. And yet, I stood in the door with a gun and said, don't do this, full knowing that 2 more steps and I would have murdered someone
Yeah.
in order to save a life and prevent an atrocity. Where's the balance, my friend? All of these things are part and parcel of the drives that must be balanced in every human being. You have your own encyclopedia of experiences. Did you ever read a book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning?
No.
Viktor Frankl was a young doctor before the beginning of World War II in a place called Austria. His old parents lived there and had been highly educated people. He had been raised to be a doctor and an intellectual. He had a wife, he had small children. And when World War II rolled around and the Nazis came in and they took the Jewish people out of Austria, his parents, his wife, his children, and he were all put in concentration camps. And he was the only one that survived those hideous, brutal experiences. And he came out of the other side of that, not condemning everybody who was German, not condemning violence as a whole, but with the realization that what a human being has within them is the capacity to make their choice about how they're going to respond to something. Not the choice about whether something's going to happen or not, but inside of them, what do I choose to do? And I think that that is the griddle that we're on with this entire planet. It's about our individuality. It's about our choices. It's about what we choose to do and do not choose to do. I also have stories of people who were Quakers or other people who refused to do violence at all. And they died on the horns of that dilemma because they refused to lift their hands. Was it right or wrong? Neither. It was their choice to respond, their necessity to respond. Is there such a thing as a holy warrior? Is there such a thing as a person who stands up and says, not on my watch? My children won't be killed. My town won't be destroyed. The people who are innocents who live here deserve someone who is able to be violent and step forward and put an end to this by being violent. It goes back to the Hopi stories, hundreds of years of Hopi legends. They talk about the first man and the people who came out of the Sipapu, the hole in the lower world that let them into this world. And the place was full of monsters. And they were destroying the people, and the people were innocent because they had never had to fight. And they didn't know what to do, and they were being murdered. And the first man looked up and down and said, oh no, not on my watch. And he became a monster killer. And he recognized that he was a monster at that point.
Mm.
Honey, it's within all of us. It's not light and dark. It's not light and shadow. It's a conglomerate of choices that we make on who we become and what we choose to do about it. And it's not as simple as if only there were world peace. This planet isn't built for that. I would love to think it could be.
Yeah.
But the
It's hard
evidence,
to grapple with, like, a part of me refuses to accept the idea that we can't move closer to that. Like, whether I see that in my lifetime or like in descendants forwards lifetimes, I, as a being of conscious thought, of awareness, of love, of compassion, who has a beating heart and is able to look at another person, I understand that there are like, that people get backed, that hurt people. And when, if you back somebody into a corner, like sometimes they have no other options. But I would like to believe that there are steps that we can take so that we don't back people into those corners.
well, it's worth working toward. But I would go back to the fact that one of the things that I hate about current culture and condemnation is the continual use of privilege as a term of invective. And I would say that we have been privileged in our culture. Between you and I, we are both privileged not to
Mm-hmm.
have been the victims of extreme and extraordinary violence. And part of what we do is help others who have been those victims learn how to cope, learn how to heal, learn how to stand up again. because as far as I can tell, reality will continue to happen whether we want it to or not, even though we work diligently to keep it from being the ugliness that it is possible to be. And I agree with you. It's worth working toward. I would not by any manner of means say don't do it. I would say we will continue to do this task and to pick up the pieces. And if it comes to the point of standing with my less than agile human body between harm and an innocent, I will still stand there and I will do violence to continue to survive if I am able.
Because it's that primal nature. That's
No, it's
really
because it's a choice. I will not fall back and allow responsibility for my choices to fall on primal nature. It's a choice. The Quaker can choose to say, I will do no violence and die for it. Good. I didn't choose that. And that is a personal choice that I will have to hold responsibility for, with the full recognition that there are consequences for every choice we make.
wow. This is why I needed you on my show. Because you have this ability of cutting through all the bullshit and talking about the objective nature of nature in a way that like I resist and that I want to understand deeper
It's
and know that
miserable
I'm
and
just
uncomfortable.
like naivety. Say what you said again?
It's miserable and uncomfortable and it hurts, and I don't blame you for not wanting it. I don't want it either.
Yeah. And it just makes me think about like so I guess like what we do, I'm always thinking about so what do we do? Like what do we do with that knowledge is we empower our own choices.
Yes. And we
And
have
we
no
can't
control.
affect another person's choice. Like as much as we want to, as much as we think that we can, we literally cannot.
Nor should we.
Yeah.
Nor should we.
Like we can't like you can inform and you can try and sway, but at the end of the day like you can't make a decision for another person.
Right.
And you shouldn't.
And
I totally agree with that.
I totally agree that we should inform and we should try to sway. And in cases where there is an extreme choice necessary, we should have the courage to stand up and make it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's required.
And that is part of why did you use the word night?
Well, because the legends of the Round Table talked about the idealism of people coming together for a higher purpose, because there is a series of 3 books by a woman named Elizabeth Moon called The Deed of Paxenarian. And it is entirely a fantasy story that talks about a young woman who starts off as a farmer's daughter, and her daddy wanted her to marry the local pig farmer, and she just wanted to go away and be a soldier. And so early one morning, just before daybreak, she ran for it. And she did. She signed up with the company and she became a soldier. And gradually, through her experiences, worked up from being a mere soldier to doing what was right in every case, following her conscience, until she became connected to her deities in the end, to be guided into ever more difficult choices and situations for the good and the preservation of that which was innocent, that which was right, that which deserved to be nurtured, and for the necessity to stand between that and that which would destroy it. Those stories caught my heart and they caught my mind and have been a part of something that is important to me. Also, because without a structure of idealism and rules for yourself to say, this is acceptable to me and I will support this, it's very easy to get lost in the subjective perception of, well, it's okay this time. Some things are not.
Mm-hmm.
Some things are. I'll grant that. I can have a chocolate sundae and I will realize that I might as well put it in my hip pocket and wear it sticking out my backside because it's going there anyway. And it's okay this time. If I don't do it every day, it won't get that big. But on the other hand, how about the consequence of, for instance, not spaying my animals?
Mm.
It leads to more suffering. How about the consequence of not educating children? Leads to more suffering. How about the consequence of knocking somebody in the head when they walk away from their ATM? They've got a pocket full of money, and I wouldn't mind having that.
Mm.
Really? Is it okay just once?
It leads to more suffering.
It leads to more suffering. Now, here's a real tricky one. And will admit freely, I have transgressed in this particular direction. I had a little girl, 18 months old, blonde and fair as she could be, and a big red ant had bitten her. She was swelling like this, and she was screaming in pain, and I had absolutely no money. So I pulled up outside of a grocery store and I went in and I opened up the meat tenderizer, emptied a little bit in my hand, closed it, put it back on the shelf, and came out and made a poultice with that to put on an ant bite because that stops the pain and it
Mm.
stops the toxin.
Mm.
Was it thievery? Yes, it was. Was it the right thing to do? It ended the suffering.
Mhm. Yeah,
Things
I
are
under
not,
it's interesting thinking about the nature of good and acknowledging that to be connected to your inner heart and to be a knight of the inner heart is a lifestyle in which you are determining for yourself what good and evil
yes,
are.
yes. And there is no way that I will let somebody go past this discussion and pretend that because you are moving to your perception of the highest good, you can escape the consequences of any choice and any action that you make.
Right.
There's the fundamental bottom line. No matter what you do, good or bad, there will be consequences. And in your decision, you damn well better make sure that you're willing to take them if you're
Yeah.
going to decide.
That
So
makes me think
rather
about
than,
what you were saying about breaking up with people. Is it's like you're doing it for your highest good, but that might not like the other person might not experience that as good.
exactly, exactly. There
Yeah.
are consequences, and you cannot control their consequences. You can only control your own. There's no right choice, wrong choice. There are choices with consequences, and you will pay.
So all of this makes me think about magic and spell work. This is something I've been super passionate about my whole life, right? Like I was born making spells. Like
Yeah, you did
something
that.
that I do very naturally. And it's also something that I've learned a lot of mistakes with, right? About what you can try to affect and what you can't. Like I think that it's pretty common knowledge that you shouldn't do love spells because you can't affect another person's free will. And like if you're starting a relationship with a captive person, like it's not going to go well. Like they have to be organically with you. And so I'm wondering what you think the capacity of magic is and what it is that we're doing when we do ritual to affect a certain outcome.
As far as capacity, I saw a video clip a couple of nights ago of a little dumpy, kind of rounded, bent up old Chinese guy who came in and he had a brick in one hand and a glass bottle in the other. And he showed it and he set the brick down and set the glass bottle on top of it. And he stepped back about 4 feet and he gathered himself and went, whoo! From 4 feet away, the brick and the bottle broke. Tell me about the capacity of magic. Whatever you discipline and work on, you can achieve. But
Because it's
um,
energy.
yeah, you are a
Because
being
it's
of
the conscious
energy.
toning of energy.
Yeah, it's energy. Everything is energy.
I think that I understand that on like on a theoretical, like knowledge based level. But I think that there's a deeper part of me that wonders. So like for example, in my own life, to kind of just talk about some personal experiences. Um, my I haven't talked about this on my show yet, but it is important and I want to. But in January, my dad and my two baby sisters passed away, in a really like tragic turn of events, and he hadn't been able to see them for a really long time. And I had, in the months leading up to this tragedy that had happened, I had been like actively working with the energies to create justice. That's what I wanted. I was looking for balance. I was looking for communication. I was looking for an open flow for healing to take place. And what's happened is like they're all like dead, right? And so I know that that story has nothing to do with the energy and the magic that I put out into the world, because that was his own story, that was his own agreement, and that I didn't create the terms that like put that into effect. But I am wondering, like this whole time that I'm doing like a healing spell on my dad to open up channels of communication, when I'm sitting on the Zoom call in the courtroom making a sigil to create balance and justice and safety for my little sisters, and that's 3 months before they end up like meeting this very jarring, cruel, horrific fate. There's a part of me that can't help but wonder, how did my energy interact with this story? Because I consciously wasn't trying to affect their lives, but I was trying to consciously create a certain energy that in some ways technically worked, but it certainly isn't what I thought justice looked like. And
Yeah.
if if their mother was to ever see this, like there's no way that she would say that what happened was justice.
No, sweetheart. On the other hand, let's look at it going back to the board. No energy can be destroyed.
Yeah.
It changes form.
Yeah.
What happened stopped the suffering, didn't it? For those three, the suffering is done. The other people, well, you're still suffering. But you didn't ask for grace for yourself. You asked for grace for the little ones.
Yeah.
And when we, in our very limited human view, say justice and stop the suffering, we think that it means that we will continue in the same form and in the same situation. And when things die, they're not gone, they've
No.
changed form.
Yeah. And he believed really heavily in reincarnation. So something that has given me a lot of peace is that like his evolution is continuing, but from a perspective that allows him to evolve. Where he hit the wall in this lifetime of what he could evolve through. Like there was a pain that he had experienced that he physically could not overcome.
Yeah. And here's one of the places where we have gone off into the dark areas on the board. In our map, there are tremendous gaps that we just flat don't know.
And
We
can't
do
know.
know that spirit continues. I can say I know because I have experienced speaking to people after they're no longer wearing their skin suit,
Yeah.
at them, and acquired information that I could have gotten in no other fashion that was applicable to things that were not mine to know about. I was able to pass the information to people that it made a difference for. And so I know for certain, from my point of view, things don't end when you drop the skin suit. The little ones are no longer little, they are spirit bright,
Mm-hmm.
without a trail of suffering behind them.
Yeah.
And he is having a chance to do what he does. Now then, the repercussions of that you sit with, yes, you had the right to ask. Honestly, honey, I would have to say that the harshest spell that I could ask on anything or anyone is justice. And I have to be willing to face justice myself if I call it.
Yeah. It was one of those things that has really changed the way that I understand our power in a
Yeah.
way that like sort of like obviously I haven't stopped. Like I'm not scared enough to be like, oh, this is something that we should never touch, you know? Like obviously I think that there's something very important inside of this that makes me go back to this and say, well, when we ask like if we can ask for justice, if we can create justice, and this kind of goes back into the larger collective, I've been thinking a lot about like what do I as an individual do to affect the energy of the larger whole. And when I think about as above so below, I think of like as within so without. Something that heals inside of me is healing somewhere inside of the larger collective. Like if we're experiencing these conflicts, I can see how that conflict is also showing up on a very small scale in my own individual life. And so to sow the energetic seeds of change has to be done mindfully and with intention. But if we don't know what we're asking for, it's a tremendous like responsibility to ask with intention.
Could I offer my perspective?
Please.
When you're sowing seeds, you're not in control of the plant that grows. Are
Mm-hmm.
you, by asking that these things be done, trying to control someone else's choices? Because I totally agree with you. What happens inside of you spreads out. The choices that you make, the being that you deliberately be, spreads out like ripples across the planet and does have an effect. That is a very powerful spell. It's a very powerful use of energy and does not direct anyone else's choices.
No.
So I believe that as a conscientious person in a world of chaos and suffering, it is my duty to hold the roots of goodness, of beauty, of peace, of healing, to do the best I can whenever I can put my hands on it, to make a difference in a positive fashion, and beyond that, to move that energy out from me as far as it could go without me telling it what to do, because at that point, I'm setting myself up to be so-called wise when honestly, we don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know.
I think it's
There's a
interesting that you just said so called wise because you were, in my experience, have just had so much wisdom to share.
only if it's useful to you, it's bullshit to somebody else, babe. And if I can sit in that and recognize, whoosh, both of those things are true, then I have to hold my own conscience and only hold my own truth without trying to be the big poobah, because really I'm very, very allergic to people who stand up on a grandstand and say, I have all of the answers.
Yeah.
Because usually, there's that backside of the lion again.
I think that that's something that I love about our group of readers that like we work with and that we're connected to that our our queen Shannon like tends to bring together at our specific like little caravan of readers all have this kind of commonality within us that we're looking to help people find themselves. We're not really looking to tell you your future. We're not really looking to tell you about like tall, dark, and handsome, you're about to win the lottery. You know, like that's not the work that we do. Like that's what
If you've
people
got
come
that
to
one in
us
your
for.
pocket, I bought a ticket. I did.
But what we're looking for is to help people feel empowered enough to believe in their own knowing.
Yes. Yes. Because that's the essence of freedom. And the only way that the world can genuinely help end a lot of suffering and can grow spiritually is for people to take responsibility for their own freedom.
Yeah. What does that mean? How does someone take responsibility for their own freedom?
Well, what I said about, no, I'm not going to put that down to essential nature. This is my choice. And
Mm.
I recognize I will take consequences for whatever choice I make. That's what it means.
Taking radical responsibility.
Yep.
Interesting. I understand. That resonates. Wow. So, if someone wanted to become a knight of the inner heart, what would they do?
They would take a look at what all of the old legends were about each of those pathways and each of the Sephiroth. And then they would travel the pathway inside of themselves in their meditations and their dreams and face the troubles that they encountered for themselves outside of other people's experiences and build their own catalog of, this was useful to me, I learned this, can I go back and learn more? And make a habit of doing it. That's what
Mm.
I do. And I will not say that I'm finished with all of the journeys. I cannot possibly say that I feel that I have accomplished. I'm working it. And I think that that's just about all that anyone of any honesty can say. I'm working it. Some people have been working it longer and could do very well, and other people are just starting out and there are miraculous things, and then there are places we fall on our faces.
Mm. And it's all part of the path. So
Yep.
to be I really want to like anchor in this idea that people who are following their I like to say it like connecting with your light or following your inner light is being a knight of the inner heart because it's having the bravery to be an individual
Yes.
when you don't have to be.
Having the bravery to be free when you don't have to be. It's much easier to let somebody else tell you what to do. And you know why? Because you can always blame it on them when it goes wrong.
Yeah. But
Once you
even
make your
listening
own decisions, you have to say, oh, that was stupid, or
right,
ouch, that hurt, or damn, I won't do that again. Or
right.
maybe, oh, thank God I chose that. Let's do it again.
Hmm.
And both of those things happen. Both
Yeah.
of
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like I've gained a deeper understanding of the map and the tree of life and how they work and what the Sephiroth mean. I think that when you first posed it to me and you said that they were destinations that you reached, I was like, how do I get there?
it's not a place, it's a state of being. There is
Exactly.
no time. There is no space. The doorway is inside of you and it opens to the universe of your imagination. Your imagination is not some useless thing like Mickey Mouse. Your imagination is the doorway into all that is true and all that is spiritual and all that is magic.
So then you would say that by exercising someone's imagination, whether that's in like a creative pursuit or that's in a meditation where they're like daydreaming, that is interacting with magic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which also ties
So
into
many-
Carl Jung's work, where it's like if you're actively engaging with the imagination, then you're understanding your subconscious mind, you're understanding your deeper desires, and therefore you can pattern yourself accordingly because you can understand, okay, if my mind is bringing this up to my attention, then there's something here to teach me, and that's where we
Mhm.
look into like that's how people learn symbolism and how to communicate with the universe, right? I think that
Yes.
people think that you have to be an oracle or like have some kind of gift to understand signs and synchronicity, but really it's just about everything around you is created of sign and synchronicity. Like right
Yep.
now, being surrounded by all of this blue and white, like that itself is a sign. That itself is synchronicity. Like when I'm anywhere, I'm constantly surrounded by the universe responding to the feedback that I'm emitting.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
having is evidence of wanting.
Yes.
Even if it's like an unconscious desire that you don't know that you have.
You slowly allow yourself to notice your own synchronicities, and your daydreams matter. Your night dreams matter. You find yourself living in both worlds all at once because all of it, once you start paying attention, is true and is real and does matter, you just learn to recognize the meanings. When you were a little baby, you could see people talking to you and you knew that they had intention and you responded to their feeling and their emotion and you laughed or you cried depending on what they were moving toward you. Well, your own higher spirit is moving toward you with its own language. And
Mm,
as you live and seek to understand, your understanding grows.
yeah. Wow. I really love that in this episode we've talked so much about the reality of connecting with your wisdom. It doesn't excuse you or remove you from pain. It just
Nope.
gives you an understanding of what's happening and an opportunity to center and respond rather than react.
You may or may not understand what's happening, but you absolutely can center and respond instead of just reacting. And by the way, as you gain an experience, as you get older, it does get easier if you're paying attention and you're working the path.
Mm. In what
Then,
ways?
in what way?
Yeah.
Well, did you learn to drive a car? When you first got into the car, did you know how to drive?
No.
Sure. And now you can get in your car and you can go all the way across the country, or maybe
Yeah.
all the way to the tip of South America because you know how to operate the vehicle. It's
Yeah.
the same thing. You become more and more accustomed to paying attention to the signs, paying attention to what's going on. How did you know recently when your car had an electrical problem? Well, if you were 3 years old, you would have had no clue because you had no experience with it.
Mm.
As we get older, we gain more experience. The more attention we pay, the more we have amassed understanding if this, then that, and we're still moving into the complete unknown. But there's more behind you that you have to work with.
Yeah.
And then when we jump off and we drop the skin, we're all on an equal playing field and go, I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're not dead. We're not gone. We're just in a new place.
I love that magic is awareness.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Magic is all of the faculties that you have that you can bring to bear to interact
Mm.
with increasing effectiveness.
Mm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Interesting. If somebody were wanting to start this journey, right? Like, say that this is somebody who is dabbling in astrology, they're starting to understand some spiritual concepts, but this is like some of these ideas that we gave them kind of went over their head. How can they begin to connect deeper with their heart today, right now, after this episode?
Right now, I want to send you to go read a couple of books by a man named Robert Moss, who will talk to you about dreams and dreaming and listening to your own cues and understanding yourself.
Mm.
If you want to use traditions and patterns, sure, come back and take a look at my map. If you want to wing it and go forward in the world and find only your own input, take a look at somebody who is taught dreams and dreaming. Now, give you a clue about this old fellow. This man was a little boy in Australia and he died several times and didn't leave. He came back and kept on living, but he was a very, very sick little boy. So he spent a huge amount of time by himself. And his dreams and his daydreams became very, very real to him. And over years and years, when he got to be an older man, well past middle age, he moved to a place in New York where he was just smitten by the beauty of a hawk that came and sat and just looked, and it looked like it was specifically talking to him in a tree. He bought the place and he started living there, and he started having dreams of a woman who was Native American coming and talking to him repeatedly in a language that he didn't understand.
Wow.
And he started writing it down. And he went and talked to friends of his who happened to be Mohawk Indians, and they said, oh, holy shit. That is the archaic version of our language from a long time ago. He learned to speak Mohawk so he could speak with this woman and was actually, she is a living spirit who did live, and he was able to discover her history. Dreams and dreaming are not BS.
No.
They're not imaginary. Magic is not imaginary. Coincidence is not imaginary. And if you want to start off without having to study anybody else's traditions, that's an easy place to start. And if you want to do it without anybody else's ideas interfering with you, start writing down your own dreams and your daydreams. And just pay
Mhm.
attention. Don't try and decide that they mean something. Just notice. Just notice. And themes will begin to come up. And you will notice coincidences. And you will notice, oh, one day this critter flew over and it was headed that direction. Well, that begins to come into the encyclopedia that you are building. This whole map is only a set of symbols meant to represent traditions about building your own encyclopedia. You don't need the traditions. You can do it
Mm.
yourself.
Because
It's
it's
easier
something
with
that
tradition.
we possess innately, that we're able
Yes.
to tap into because we're a part
Yep.
of.
Yep. Because each of us is our own kind of critter with our own kinds of cues and our own kind of nature. And if you pay attention to it and do the best you can to be whatever you consider good, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
Let yourself get lost in resentment and bitterness and misery and anger, and you'll do stupid things.
Mm.
Keep disciplining yourself to move toward what makes me happy, what makes me peaceful, what ends suffering for those around me, and you've got a pretty good guidance.
That's beautiful. Today I was told that, and I'm going to misquote them, but it was essentially that you cannot take on the grief of the world,
Yeah.
and yet you cannot leave it alone. Like, you must pick it up and set it down and acknowledge it without embodying it and getting lost in it, because it is not yours to carry alone. It is not your
Right.
problem to solve by yourself. You are not like going to be able to affect that kind of massive change. So being able to feel it and acknowledge it, and then set it down and say, okay, like, what do I need to do in me, in my own life, that doesn't like me, like, that isn't posing my life as a mirror to this larger problem, but instead is like embracing the wholeness of your own choices, and then returning to that grief, that collective feeling, to say, what have I learned? What do I still need to learn? What can I give? Without taking it all on. Because it's not one person or a group of people's alone to solve, but rather something that, through the process of our own inner alchemization, our own coming to know ourselves, will naturally evolve into the next iteration of life.
Could I give my technique for dealing with it?
Please.
Okay, let's start off with a lady named Dolores Krieger, who is a PhD in nursing who taught therapeutic touch, and with a group of people who are working to bring energy medicine into the mainstream by the scientific research to prove it, um, called the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. And Dawson Church is one of them, and Bruce Lipton is one of them. You can follow those names down the rabbit hole and go find the information. But the information comes down to your intention makes a difference when it spreads out in the world. That when you deliberately pray for, which means ask yourself and the universe that things be changed to a specific purpose. It's like making a spell, but it's not being specific. Let's try, may everyone in the world who has had a broken heart have their suffering eased and their heart comforted. May everyone in the world who is hungry right now have their suffering eased and their hunger fed and their discomfort comforted. Piece by piece, everything that I feel that hurts me, may everyone in the world have this. Everyone who feels this be relieved of suffering. It is similar to the vow of the Bodhisattva. You go through this life sampling and feeling and tasting each of the things that hurts. Well, what do you do with it? You say, May everyone in the world who is suffering with this find the ease, find the reliefs of suffering, find whatever it is that's needed to move this off. Because if the theory is that we live in a free will universe, that there has to be help requested before the help can be there and do something about it. We can't just come in and force somebody to do something. But if we work on building a backlog of energy to ease, to help, to soften, to heal by our own movement of energy moving out from us, called prayer, called intercession, called spells, called whatever you want to call it. Call it Reiki, I don't care. It doesn't matter that it wears a label on its butt. It only matters that you do it. We're building the world into a better place without having to pick up a shovel to move the pig shit.
Mm. Mm.
And that's something that I believe is my responsibility. That regardless of whether I'm sitting in a place and I have a nice dinner in front of me or a comfy chair beneath me, I am responsible for noticing, oh, there is this pain. Well, how about if everybody in the world who had this particular pain had it dissolve and release and felt better? And guess what? When you do it, suddenly yours doesn't hurt so bad.
Yeah.
It eases, it changes. It's a spell that works from the center out and flows out like ripples. Did you ever drop a rock in a mud puddle?
Mm-hmm.
And you see how the ripples spread out until they touch every piece of the shore?
Yeah.
What does the rock know about what it did?
Nothing.
Exactly. The rock's in the mud at the bottom of the pond. Those ripples, however, have touched everything in that pond.
Yeah.
We're rocks, honey. We're on our way through. Make the ripples the ones that you choose.
Yeah. Make the ripples the ones that you choose. Absolutely. I've taken so much away from this conversation about ownership of one's energy and what it truly means to be a magician. And I'm really grateful for every single conversation that we have because I feel like I learn so much every time. So thank you for coming on my show. I'm sure that I will definitely have you on again.
Thank you for asking. You know, as projectors, without the ask, there's nothing I can do but sit there and stew and go, damn. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Absolutely. I understand. And it's the funny thing about being a projector too is when they don't ask and you say it anyway and you're like, that was not well received. My bad.
Or even, gee, that wasn't a ripple that worked, now was it? But if they're not asking, and you can pull back inside of yourself and find your own core and say, may the suffering from this situation be relieved for everyone in the world who hurts like this, including mine, for everyone in the world who feels unheard, unseen, and has a solution that is not being touched. May that suffering be resolved. May the answers be able to be given. And suddenly, something changes. You may never know it. It might have happened in Mongolia. That shaggy little pony wasn't paying any attention, and suddenly that little Mongolian girl gets up and says, "Pony," and the pony's ears come up. And they have a conversation and they ride away together. You will never know where you touch. But you know when you live by your own standards and you keep your own ethics.
Yeah.
The ripple that you cause is the one that you choose. And you will never know the result. You don't have to. This is how we really change the world. This is how it really happens.
From the inside out.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
will never see the results because you're still busy working it. You're
Right.
sitting in the bottom of the pond.
Yeah. Fully immersed in your own subconscious story.
Yeah. Conscious, subconscious, don't matter. Are we deliberately creating a ripple? Well, yes, we're magicians. We do this.
Yeah.
We are priestesses. We do this.
Mm.
We are women of wisdom. we do this.
And
We
even the people who are not, who don't see themselves as this powerful are doing this too.
Precisely. All you have to do is do it. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter whether you think you're a great power. As a matter of fact, if you start thinking you're a great power, you get all involved in thinking about how big you are and what you're doing, and you really miss the point and stop doing the work.
Yeah,
It,
you stumble. Yeah,
that's
that's
not our
very.
job.
If someone wanted to work with you, where could they find you in your work?
Well, I have a website at rainjuvoli.com, and there's contact information on the website. And yeah, I'm available to do Zoom calls and phone calls. And yeah, I charge. This is how I keep eating. Thank you, guys.
Definitely well worth it. You are incredible at what you do, and I am really, really grateful to have you as one of my friends and one of my mentors.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I'm going to close this out for now. So I just want to give a big thank you to everybody who tuned into this conversation. I'm really curious to know what you experience in your own journey, and what you think about the nature of light and dark and shadow and choice and all these wonderful things that we brought up today. So I would love to hear your feedback on the episode, and I look forward to sharing what I have in store for you guys next. This podcast has been and continues to unfold to be such a blessing, and such a point of curiosity for me to truly evolve some ideas that are sitting within me, and being able to understand them and give them back like the medicine that I know we need, and I'm grateful to continue to make this choice to show up. And I'm grateful that you continued to make this choice to watch my video. That's pretty awesome. So until next time, thank you for joining the Learning Luminaries, and we will see you again soon. Bye.